All right, welcome to another episode of the Passion in Motion podcast. I'm your host, Mutsa, and today I'm joined by another very special guest, Tara Fannon. Hi, Tara.
Hi.
How's it going?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm so excited for our conversation today. I know we're gonna get into a lot of interesting things, but before we get to all that, I always ask my guests to give, just a brief spiel about themselves so that our listeners can also have a better understanding of who you are as we're getting into this conversation. So over to
Sure.
you.
Thank you. Sure. So I'm a qualitative researcher. I've been doing research for 16 years. This is my third career. Prior to that, I was a graphic designer, not a very good one. And I was a licensed body worker. I was a massage therapist for a lot of years. And that was a nice time in my life. And yeah, I live in New York City. I've been here for about 15 years in Brooklyn. And I've lived a good few places. Prior to that, I was living in Dublin, Ireland for about 10 years, and loved it. It was very good to me. I went back to university. I met my now partner and made lots of friends and got to do a bit of traveling. So it was a great an honor and privilege to have that opportunity. Yeah.
That's so cool. There's so many questions I already have. Just from that. So I guess okay, the first main question is because you just mentioned three professions here, from massage therapist to graphic designer to researcher. Those are three completely different areas of work. So let's start with the massage therapist piece. Like, is that something you kind of always wanted to be, or how did you land into
No,
that?
no, actually. I mean, I was not a kid who knew what they wanted to be when they grew up. I was not one of those kids where, and maybe this is just sort of like in sort of the cultural zeitgeist, this notion of kids that just know exactly what they want to be and they work toward that from like a young age. I was not that kid. I just knew that I loved to be creative.
Mm,
I loved dancing. And I knew that I wanted to make a positive difference in the world. And I was super duper interested in people. And so I think my careers, most notably being a researcher, was sort of shaped by those interests, for sure. And in all of the things that I've done, either in my work life or just for fun or habit, have been sort of allow me to explore those interests, for sure.
that's
Yeah.
cool. Yeah. So what inspired you to become a graphic designer after being like a massage therapist? Like what was that?
No, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I think because I didn't know what I wanted to be growing up, but there's still this sort of like pressure on young people to know what they want to be when they grow up.
Yeah.
Um, there always has been. I felt like I needed to be something. So first I was a massage therapist, and I went into that just because I was sort of, again, just really interested in wanting to like I'm also a helper, right? So part of me
Mm.
wanting to make a difference in the world is like by nature I'm a helper. I love to help people. I like to, problem solve, help them feel better. And um, I had a friend who was a massage therapist, and she loved it, and it inspired me. And so I think that was kind of what spearheaded my interest in becoming a massage therapist. And I did that probably for about 8 to 10 years. And it was lovely, but very hard on my body physically to do
Mm.
that. And then from there, I sort of pivoted into graphic design. I always loved to draw and illustrate and sort of create these worlds. And, back in those days, graphic design was kind of hot. And I thought, I can do this. But I am not very, I am not very tech minded. And the industry and the tools were changing more rapidly than I could kind of keep up with. Um, and it was just very hard to be competitive for someone who wasn't like top of the heap in that industry. So I kind of like retired my graphic design tools and, you know, kind of went back into massage therapy. And in between my three careers, I've like probably had 100 jobs. Okay.
Mm.
And maybe that's exaggerating, but I've had a lot of jobs, and some of them strange and odd, and others really helpful. And I've learned a lot of skills and tools and gained a lot of experience along the way. And it all counts, whether it's a career or a job. And in 2003, I moved to Ireland, and I took all my skills over there and just tried to kind of find my way. And I'm a dual citizen. So after being there for a period of time, I was able to go back to college for free.
Mm.
And that was never an opportunity I had over here because I was a good student, but I wasn't a great student. And to get a scholarship, um, you need to be a great student, or to go to a good school, you need to have the financial means to do that. So
Yeah.
I went back to university and studied sociology because I love people.
Mm.
And it was just opened up my world. I loved it so much, and pursued a master's degree, and then I went on to do my PhD. I did my field work over here in New York City, but most of my studies over in Ireland because I was there for 10 years. I really a much longer answer to the question of graphic design, but it's sort of
Yeah.
all kind of on a continuum. But um, yeah, my PhD is in sociology, and my background is in disability research, disability and gender research. And that's kind of where I sort of cut my teeth in research, was in the disability and deaf communities when I was like still in academia, but I have since left academia. So, um, yeah, it's been a long and winding road, but an interesting one nonetheless.
Yeah, no, it sounds very, very interesting. So again, I want to structure my questions in a way that is, it builds up on each other because again, there's a lot here that I'm just fascinated by so far already. So what kind of graphic design were you doing like
Oh,
throughout your graphic design phase?
uh, nothing of note. Like I was working for myself, like mostly, and this kind of goes back a while, so it might be hard for me to recall like the details, but
Yeah.
um, I worked for myself, and was like designing like ads, print ads back when that was
Mm.
kind of a thing, and like desktop publishing, where like newsletters and things like that.
Okay.
And then I try to branch over to sort of also create design like the like the proofs. That's not really the right word for like websites. So I
Mm.
didn't build websites, but I helped sort of design like what a website would look like.
Ah,
And
okay.
and I worked on a few things, but it was a real struggle for my brain. It did not mesh with my brain very well. That creative outlet, unfortunately.
No, that's fair. Yeah, things like that can be like that. So no, that's cool. So I know you said you worked a bunch of jobs, some strange. What was like the oddest or strangest job that you worked in, if you remember?
I don't know if this is, I guess, like an odd job, not odd like weird, but just like how did I end up here kind of odd, was like I
Yeah.
worked, the front counter at a dry cleaners. This goes
Mm.
back to when I was like, I don't know, in my late teens, early 20s. I've been working since I was 15. My first job while I was in high school, like on a work study program, was at Taco Bell. So
Okay.
I worked there, making bean burritos and taking orders, and that was actually quite fun. I managed to get all my friends hired, so it was like a party all the time. Um,
Nice.
Another very fun job that I did, after I graduated high school and I was trying to figure out what to do next, was I was the dough master at Pizza Hut. So that was fun. So I'd get up every morning, go to Pizza Hut at 5 a.m. and make the dough in this giant Hobart mixer, and then lay all the pizza dough out in trays so that when the shift came in, they could just quickly make the pizzas and get them out the door. So that was fun. Um, I've worked in vet kennels, washing dogs and feeding cats. I've been a gardener. Um, I was a telemarketer for a hot minute. Like I've done a lot of things. I've done a lot of things.
That is so cool. It sounds like you've pivoted a lot into
Yeah.
different industries, different types of jobs, different things. How has that experience shaped you as a person from, it sounds like from when you're young and up until now? It sounds like, you know, you're a person who likes to I mean, not maybe you don't like it, but you're somebody who ends up getting into different things, you know, and doing different skills and whatever. Like, how has that shaped you as a person today?
Yeah. Well, for a long time, I felt a little bit bad about myself because, like, I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I kept sort of like changing, track. And but at this point in my life, I look back on it and see it as, a real gift because it has taught me how to be resilient, how to be proactive, how to take initiative, how to build things from scratch, you know, and really just how to like carve out new paths in uncertain times like now. And
Mhm.
I'm like super grateful for that. And also I've just picked up a lot of like skills, like a lot of skills along the way that, you know, in the job market they call them soft skills, but someone that I've worked with recently who's a career coach likes to call them skills that don't expire, which I think is a much nicer way to put it because soft skills I think maybe has a negative connotation a little bit, and that's not at all what they are. They're skills that, you know, enable us to just relate to one another.
Yeah.
So, um, and I learned a lot of those in my time, navigating
Yeah, no, I
navigating.
can imagine
Oh,
that.
yeah, yeah.
No, that's really cool. You know, okay, so last question on this kind of
Yeah,
topic. So, what is one skill that you learned that you thought, I'm probably never gonna do that again? And then you found yourself like years later or sometime down the line, and you were like, wow, that thing that I learned back when, that you were like, because okay, for example, for me, editing podcasts, like doing because when I did this previous podcast, I did all the audio editing and all that. So I used an app to edit all the audio, and I was like, I'm just doing it. I'm just I'm not like experienced in it, but I was just doing it. And then a few years later, I got a job because like we're looking for an audio editor, and I was like, I've been doing this for years, and I didn't know that this is a skill that I acquired. And it was just like a wow, no skill is useless. You know,
yeah,
you never know what that could be down the line. Like you never know how valuable that skill could be, even if you didn't yourself think it was valuable, but it actually ended up being a valuable skill to have sometime down the line. Did you have something like that happen
yeah.
for you?
Potentially, like I'm kind of like I'm combing through the recesses of my brain to think about some of the skills that I've picked up along the way that maybe I didn't think I was going to use. I mean, I guess what I would just sort of caveat that with my answer with is that many of the jobs that I did, maybe at the time I didn't realize that I was like, you know, building and expanding certain skills that later or in my next stage were really helpful. And I
Hmm.
think like one through line skill that is an absolute essential, I think, across industries that is not at all useless, but that I think has just built upon itself for me and served me well is like communication. Um, and I know that doesn't totally answer your question, but I think it communication has been something that I have taken really seriously throughout my working life and just even in my personal life too.
Hmm.
Um, just striving to be a good communicator, striving to understand how to communicate with people in ways that work best for them, not assuming that there's one way to communicate, understanding that it's not just about what I say, but how people receive and hear, and just being able to sort of adjust and adapt myself for that. And I think I don't know that I would have, you know, understood communication in that broader sense had I not sort of navigated all these different sort of like, you know, winding, you know, spots on my path, and
Yeah.
interacting with in so many different settings and environments and different people. So that's served me really, really well, I think.
You know what? And as you're speaking about this, it makes me think about these are the conversations that I've had with people about, there's this challenge that people usually have about, oh, if there was one thing you could change in the world, if you're like the world leader, what would it be? And mine is always everybody has to work in the service industry, in a front-facing job where you interact with different people, because that makes you, number one, more aware of different types of people, how to communicate with different types of people, personalities, and all that stuff. I mean, it sounds like you've been in many jobs that are
In
front
the service
facing.
industry. I've worked
Yeah.
in kitchens and I've worked as a restaurant host, and I did a very short stint waiting tables. So in that I know the service industry is broad, but that's one
Yes.
piece of it. I've also cleaned houses. So I've really done a lot.
Yeah. And I'm sure that's shaped how you interact with other human beings, right?
Yes, absolutely. And it just like being in different settings and working with different people, and understanding different lived experiences, I think helps me have empathy
Hmm.
and compassion for people and where they're at, and I guess a stronger ability to hopefully a stronger ability to meet people where they're at.
Exactly. And that's the point of why I say everybody should go through this, because that empathy and that understanding that there are going to be people who think differently than you, who look differently than you, who process things differently than you, and that's totally okay. There's no reason to be fearful of it, but it's worth understanding why they behave the way they do and finding common ground. I think that's honestly the basis of being a human being, because
Yeah. And that's what brought me to research essentially is my deep interest in people, and as a qualitative researcher, the why and the how, like
yeah,
the why and the how behind behavior and meaning and action and systems, and specifically norms and values and beliefs, and what motivates people. And I'm just so very fascinated by all of that. And that coincides with what you were just saying there. Yeah.
yeah, I love people too. So what I've gone through somewhat similar things, maybe not to the extent that you have, but it's I like studying people as well, and I feel like you really get to really understand a place when you're working and interacting with people, like if you really want to understand a culture, for example, if you're in a service industry type job, that's when you can really understand how people work and navigate and, just different types of things. For example, I have a cousin who works in the UK. He works as a telecommunicator, right? And, he's from Zimbabwe and everything, but through just that line of work, he's managed to now pick up on social things in the UK that maybe sometimes isn't really explored that much. Like, for example, when we talk about accents, and maybe since you're in Ireland, maybe there's something that we could actually you could relate to this. It's like,
Yeah.
there's different accents in the UK in general, and different accents are rated above others. There's the posh accent, and there's the in Liverpool they have the Scouser accent, and people are ranked differently based on that accent. And so now he can now pick up, like, if this person's speaking this way, he can kind of like know where they're from or which city, like, oh, this person's from London, or oh, this person's from this, or this person's from that. And he was saying that those different accents can even give you different benefits. If you have that London posh accent, you might get lower benefits than somebody who's got an accent from Liverpool. So it's just fascinating that you get to learn about a country or a place. Like if you're in a job that lets you interact with a different breadth of people, like you're not in a bubble, right? You're exposed to everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that definitely was a thing in Ireland. It intersects with class politics quite considerably.
Yeah.
Similarly in the UK, right? Um, yeah, very much so. Yeah.
How was your experience like going to Ireland as,
Hmm.
an American though? Because how were you
Yeah.
welcomed? What were the different how were people like, oh, did you feel like people were like, "Hey, we've got an American on midst," or ah, no, we've got an,
Yeah.
how was that?
Well, I went in late 2003, and unsurprisingly, we were not very popular back then. We are also not very popular right now. So when I went over to Ireland, I was not welcomed. I
Hmm.
mean, Ireland at the time, much less so now, was predominantly like a white Catholic culture.
Yeah.
Um, I'm a white person, and so there was no sort of discrimination on that part.
Hmm.
I ran into like some people um, curious about why I was there as an American. I had one person in a bar in Cork ask me, like, or I guess just implied that I was like potentially taking a job from an Irish person, and I thought that was kind of
Mm.
an interesting thing to say. And I was just trying to kind of be mindful of like where they might be coming from and what was going on there. It was kind of a it was kind of like right around the time of the Celtic Tiger where everything was kind of coming, where things were sort of rising up, and similar to over here when we had, you know, the housing bubble that eventually burst, it was happening over there too.
Mm.
Um, and then kind of everything kind of imploded, and there was a very different vibe over there. And I was there kind of through all of it. And I was working, and I was, you know, I was paying taxes and I was contributing to society and all of that, um, like you know everybody there, and it it was fine. I mean, it really was fine. I will say though, like just on a like a social level,
Yeah.
making friends with Irish people was really really hard. So
Mm.
also at the time, like there were people coming from Australia and New Zealand and other parts of Europe. So it while it was quite an insular place, being an island nation, it was still kind of transient. There were lots of people kind of coming through, working for a bit of time and then moving on. And I made friends with lots of people from around the world. That was very easy, but making friends with Irish people was challenging. And I don't think it was necessarily because I was American, but because, you know, they are such an insular country. And I remember somebody eventually, because after like 5 years, I made some really solid Irish friends, but it took that long. I remember one of them saying to me that, you know, Irish people were like, um, Americans were like peaches. And actually, no, I'm remembering the story wrong. A friend of mine over here drew this analogy to the experience of living in Ireland, and it resonated with me. So Americans are like peaches, right? So they're like really soft on the outside, and you can kind of get in there and you can connect with them. But then in the center, we're just kind of like hard. And then and then like Irish folks and really a lot of like Western Europeans are like coconuts. They're really hard on the outside and hard to penetrate. And once you get in there, they're soft and gooey and really lovable. So
Mm.
that kind of resonated with my experience living over there and, you know, making friends, um, you know, with the Irish community. Yeah.
That is fascinating.
Yeah.
What inspired you to even like go to Ireland? Like what's the story there?
Mhm. Well, it's all started with a very good friend of mine, who I went to high school with, who said, you know, your grandparents immigrated from Ireland. You could probably get a passport. And she just sort of planted that seed, and that got the wheels turning. And I reached out to my dad, and my dad looked into it for me. And indeed, I was eligible to get an Irish passport or an European Union passport, essentially. And he helped me do all the footwork to just pull together all the documents for it. It took about a year, and I wanted to save some money. But once she sort of mentioned that to me, my friend, it sort of it that was it. I had made the decision that I was going to move there.
Mm.
I was in my 20s, so I was, you know, kind of free and easy, and didn't really have any plans. Um, and I was only going to go for like 6 months or something like that, and then I was going to travel around Europe. But like, actually, just under 6 months in, I met my now husband, and I was like, well, I guess I'll just stick around here and see where this goes. And then 10 years later, there I was. But it really all just started with my friends, sort of like planting that seed, and like that was it. I was off to the races.
That is so cool. I love that when people are just like, hey, you know what? I'm just gonna go check it out, and
Yeah,
that's changed the trajectory of your life forever,
it
right?
really did.
Just that one conversation, like, hey, you should look into heading over. Why not? You could do it.
Absolutely.
Because in my experience in America, I haven't met because the Americans who don't even have a passport, like, and a U.S. passport, they've never had the need or the thought of doing that, and so whenever I hear these kinds of stories where like someone's like, I actually want to go to another country, get a passport and go to another country and see what it's like. That's not, in my experience so far, that's not typical for generally, because a lot of Americans think America is the best place in the world, right? Like,
Yeah.
why would I ever leave? Some people don't even leave their state.
Yeah.
If you're born in Iowa, you never leave Iowa. So I don't know what do you know if that's something that's always been like, has traveling always been something that you wanted to do, like prior to that conversation with your friend? Like, what was the driving force for you to be like, I want to leave the best place in the world
Yeah.
and go to Ireland.
Yeah. Well, I don't think that I thought of the United States as the best place in the world. That's certainly I never felt that way. I mean, I've always liked being here, but I didn't do a lot of traveling growing up. For a lot of reason, for the same reason a lot of Americans don't, is because they don't they don't get the time off to do it, and often a
Mm,
lot of them don't even get paid enough money to be able to do it. So there was that, and I always like worked in jobs where, I just kind of got the bare minimum salary or paid time off. So, my traveling was limited to like road trips with my friends, which were great and fun, and I managed to see a lot. But and really, I think when I was younger, growing up, we didn't like growing. I didn't grow up in a house where we traveled. We didn't really travel. I traveled out of state once to Disney World
mm.
after it opened. That was a big deal. Down in Orlando, because I'm
Yeah.
from Massachusetts. But apart from that, we just, we would go to like we go to New Hampshire, Cape Cod, or something like that for like a week on a budget, and that was our trip. So, um, but I still knew that I wanted to do something big and exciting and different, and I wanted to just explore. And I knew that there was, and I guess maybe because I knew that there was more than here. Like the United States is lovely, and there's a lot to see, and we have, beautiful, beautiful countryside, beautiful states, beautiful landscape, all of that, beautiful national parks. Um, but I just knew that I wanted to see more. Um, and I'm so grateful for the experience because living over in Europe, Ireland essentially, it is part of Europe, although they consider themselves kind of their own country
Yeah,
because
exactly.
they're an island nation. It's still sort of like there is still the same, they still operate under the same similar values. So they value community, they value rest, they value connection, and not that we don't over here. I just think it's a different culture, and we prioritize individualism and work, and
Hmm.
and those things are somewhat antithetical to those other values. And living over there opened me up to that, and I'm so grateful because I brought that back with me. And wherever I am, wherever I'm working with other people. If I'm just I just sort of promote those values. I just try to promote the value of rest, and not for the sake of being more productive, but for the sake of rest itself, or community and how important that is, especially as we get older. Um, and strong friendships, and um, you know, exploring our interests, and allowing ourselves to experience new things in whatever way we can, within whatever means that we have, right? It doesn't have to mean uprooting yourself and moving abroad. Not everybody has that ability, and I'm very grateful I did. I took a year to save up money for it, and I managed to do it, but still not everyone has that ability. So I'm so, so grateful. And so that's kind of why I went. Um, is while I loved Ireland so very much, it does rain a lot. And like, and
Yeah.
after 10 years, it wore me down a little. And it turns out I'm someone who really, really, really likes the sunshine. So I came
Hmm.
back.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and I relate to what you're saying a lot because
Yeah.
that's why I also, if people can travel, I always like try and encourage them to do so because traveling again, it opens yourself up to different cultures, different ways of living, different ways of thinking, which can also like improve your life and how you move forward. And coming from Southern Africa, from Zimbabwe, coming to the United States, what you're describing about the culture in Ireland, that's basically what we do, what we have. Rest is important, connecting with family, friends. Like we grow up with everyone, like cousins, we see them all the time. Like it's very community oriented, whereas America is a lot more individualistic, especially like Washington DC, where I was for a majority of the time too. So
Yeah.
it was also weird for me to kind of like, but I mean, you still kind of figure it out at the end of the day. But it's so important to prioritize those things because again, life is way better when you are around people and you're surround yourself with loved ones and just just be out there, be social.
Yeah.
I feel like life is way better and more
Yeah,
interesting
and
that
when we
way.
just take
So
time to see each other, right? Like just like
exactly.
slow down and see each other. And I think, and being present is probably the greatest challenge of my life, right? Like I'm either thinking about the past or worrying about the future, um, and being present is something that I'm always, always, always trying to like work on because it just allows me to just notice and see the people around me and really experience things deeply in a way that I can't if my mind is somewhere else.
Yeah. You know what? I have loved learning everything about you so far. There's so much more that I could ask because again, I feel like you've lived an exciting life. Well, for me, it's exciting. Like there's a lot there that I love to dive into some more. But I kind of want to just move so that we have time as well to talk about your passion project and the
Yeah.
research that you've been doing. I think that was one of the major reasons why we decided to do this. So I also want to leave some good time to dive into that. So let's talk about this passion research project that you started doing with some of your colleagues because I know you said you wanted to document the personal, social, and economic impacts of like the mass layoffs that just happened, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah, sure. Um, so the layoffs, the sort of the DOGE layoffs, right? So I guess to just provide some context, I worked in government consulting, so I wasn't like a federal government employee, although there have been hundreds of thousands of layoffs in the federal government. That's had sort of a knock-on impact to adjacent industries that serve the federal government, which is the government consulting industry. And so I worked for a company as a research director for 2 years. I absolutely loved my job. I came in and I built that research practice from the ground up with a wonderful team of researchers who conducted some really important, meaningful research across different agencies. Um, and, you know, overnight, the industry was just kind of decimated because DOGE kind of came in and they terminated contracts, they descoped contracts, they paused or stopped funding altogether, and it's had a real significant impact on me personally and professionally. So, um, I lost my primary source of income and my access to comprehensive medical and dental insurance and other critical benefits. I've had immense difficulty finding new full-time employment, and I'm not alone there. And I've experienced, mental health decline a bit with increased anxiety over understandable financial uncertainty and the general state of our country.
Mm.
And, you know, it's just impacted me considerably. And I could go into a rabbit hole about all of the different ways within that it's continuing to impact me. But um, I wanted to document this moment. And so this GovCon Government Consulting Stories project, as you said, is a passion project that grew out of my need to process my own experiences and the collective impact of what so many people in my industry are experiencing and their families, right? Because their families are impacted too. So I started speaking with former colleagues, and then other people in the industry, and found a common thread of grief and disillusionment, but also resilience. Um, and systemic failure, really, in the way
Mm.
that so many have been treated in this moment. And they're not just job losses, but they really, I'm finding, having been doing this research now for a while and talking to people, stories about survival and belonging, dignity, access to um, critical resources. Um, and I think it's important to amplify these stories. So, and I think the human cost often gets lost in metrics and trends, and quite frankly, you know, um, the the media's inability to keep up with sort of the barrage of policy changes and executive orders. Like there's just so much to document. Where do you even begin? So
Yeah.
this project is about giving voice to those consultants who have been affected and how and why it matters. Um, and as I was saying before, being, being present is so important to me, especially in this culture where we are encouraged to just move on quickly, to just sort of like buck up and get on with things. Um, and I think there's power in slowing down, listening to one another, and acknowledging one another. So that's why I'm collecting this data through a short survey. It's a Google survey. There's a variety of questions on the survey. Some are close-ended to kind of get some demographic data, and then some are open-ended so that people can, in any amount of detail, share how the experience has impacted them and their families. Um, and we've had a pretty good turnout so far on the survey. The responses the responses that people share, the information they share is confidential and anonymous. We don't collect email addresses. We're not publishing any names connected with this or any identifying information. Ultimately, what I want to do is translate this data into a white paper and then maybe write some short, like news articles and try to get them published. So that, but whatever I put out there is not going to be behind a paywall. I want people to be able to access it. I want it, as I said, just document this moment in some way and use my skills as a researcher and as someone who just cares about humanity deeply in a good way. So that's kind of why I'm doing this project. And as I was saying before, and kind of got off track, um, some of what I'm seeing already in the data is really heartbreaking. So a lot of
Mm.
people are just really hurt by this and scared and very, very impacted in, you know, obvious ways, just loss of income and loss of health care, but like just less obvious ways. And so it's important to tell these stories.
It really is important to tell the stories. What is the main hope or aim once these stories are out? Is it to like inform people? Is it to inspire people? What is your dream? Like if you're in an ideal world, you put this out, what would you like to happen?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, I want to inform people because I'm not sure that um, uh, everyday folks know what's going on. Like
Yeah.
even like the mass government layoff, federal government layoffs are not really being widely covered by the press or adequately covered, in my opinion, in the press. Never mind the impact in the GovCon industry. And while I would love to collect data from, um, both sectors, federal government, that would be a lot of data. Maybe down the road I'll do that. But I'm gonna kind of start with my own industry and what I know. And the idea is to inform, um, and as I said, document it because I feel like we need to just kind of put it on the record what's going on and how it's impacting people, um,
Yeah.
because that's what we do as researchers. But ultimately, I would love to, if it's possible, just use the information to recommend, you know, changes to sort of industry-wide, like workplace practices, because what we're seeing in the data is that a lot of companies that like laid people off overnight maybe saw it coming, but they were not prepared. And there was not sort of like a crisis plan in place to deal with this. And a lot of people were just cut off. Like they received emails at midnight saying, your job is done. And so, or some people had, like a week or two, or they were getting mixed communication from leadership. It really kind of it was all over the place. And I just think that people deserve better. They deserve to be treated better. These are people um so far that are have been working in this industry, serving the federal government, doing really good, meaningful work for years, years and years. And I know that our work is not always going to love us back in the way we love it, but people deserve better. So if I can just somehow, be a part of changing how workplaces do things and treat people and prepare for the unprecedented, then that would be great.
Yeah, I support that message 100%
Yeah.
because yeah, I do I have talked to people and I've just seen stories like it was so abrupt and so like dismissive, like and it's not like it was necessarily personal, but it was hard not to take it personally, especially if you've been serving that company for years and years and years and you've dedicated a lot of your life to this. So for someone who's listening to this episode and they're hearing this and they've also gone through, because I know I've gone through a lot myself. What if they're listening to this and say, hey, I want to participate in the survey so that this information's out there?
Yeah.
How can they access the survey?
Yeah. Well, I think we're going to include the link to the survey in the show notes. We'll also include an email address that will come to me if anybody has any questions or concerns. We want to keep the survey open until the end of July. It's been open for a while now. However, if people hear this after July 31st and they really want to participate, they can still reach out to me and I'll find a way. Um, I'll find a way. Um, Obviously, if they reach out to me 6 months from now, I'm hoping that I'll have stuff published. But if it's, in August or whatever, people can still reach out to me. And also, I'm also offering this. Nobody has taken me up on the offer, but people that have either filled out the survey or not, but might be interested in doing like an interview um, about their experience. I'm opening that up too, and that's actually in the when you click on the survey link, and there's an explanation of what the survey is about. There'll also be the email address that comes to me, but then also if you're interested in doing an interview, they can reach out to me. So, uh, because you know, I don't want to turn anybody away, and I want people to be able to tell their stories, and I want to be able to tell people's stories for them um, in the best way that I can. So people can still do that. Um, yeah, that's that.
You know what? I have to say, I really appreciate you starting this project. I think it's very needed and very necessary. There's a lot of pain out there. It was just hard to see, especially with all like the DOGE cutoffs and layoffs. You just hear, oh, 15,000 layoffs, 5,000 layoffs, and it's like, and then the news cycle moves on a day later. It was
Yeah.
just like, and nothing happened to these guys. Elon Musk, nothing, right? They just come in, do whatever they want to do, and get out. But it's like it's decimated families out there. People have had to give up their mortgages. Now, people
Yeah.
who worked in this careers for 25 years are now working in FedEx, shipping boxes or just trying to do odd jobs just to like get food back on the table.
Yes.
Get their kids through school.
And referring to people who are doing really good, meaningful work as just sort of like waste and fraud has just like enraged me, I have to say. Like framing
Mm,
it like we just have to like cut away the waste and fraud. You know, I, you know, I before all of this happened, I think somewhere around 1% of the workforce worked for the federal government. This is the federal government. This isn't government consulting, just federal government alone, 1% of the entire workforce in the United States. That's not a lot. The federal government was already understaffed. And ironically, the work that my team and I were doing was helping the government hire new talent, new diverse talent, because a lot of people are retiring and they're aging out. And so we need to replace those people. And we were helping because the Biden administration had, an interest in not only diversifying their workforce, but also bringing in new, fresh talent and growing them so that they would stay and do good work for the government. And um, the Trump administration came in and they just stopped all of it. And it's just so disheartening to me because, whatever you feel about our current government and not our government, but politics, government in general is important. Government structures and processes are important. They're in place for a reason. They enable us to live the way we live in this country. So I think that gets lost.
Hmm.
That little nugget gets lost. So yeah.
And it's also unfortunately come at the worst time where the job market is absolutely horrible. Like you can't, it's one thing to lose your job, but your industry is still present. But when your industry also gets left out, and now you have to get into different things, and the job market is also, it's such a nasty mix, right?
Yeah.
It's just a nasty like, and it's so hard. So that's why I think this information needs to go out there because people need to know, like, hey, it's been a very hard year for a lot of us just trying to pivot. I'm doing this podcast because I love talking to people, but it's not really bringing me anything, right? I'm just doing this out of my passion just to do something. But it's still, I still wake up with my own anxieties and own stressors because at the end of the day, I still haven't been able to find something worthwhile, right? To make money. So, but you just need to do something to motivate you to wake up every morning and feel something. So
Yep.
I get it. I'm right there with everybody who's going through the same thing. Like it's a lot. You're not alone. There's a lot of people out here as well who are just in the same trenches and we're just trying to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I fully understand. It's really bad out there. If you're not looking for a job, bless you for not having to be looking for a job and you wouldn't know, but um, you know, it's because also, at least because I know you're in Canada currently, and I don't know what the economy is like up there, but here in the United States, it's a little shaky with, the stuff with different stuff that the government is doing. And so a lot of employers are a bit wary of hiring. So they're being more cautious about it. So there's fewer jobs and twice as much talent competing for those jobs. And on top of that, there's like all this like new stuff that we have to navigate out there as job seekers is misleading job postings and AI screening tools and spam
Mm.
offers and scam rather recruiters. And all of this just adds confusion and slows the progress for everybody, um, who are just trying to find jobs and help people find jobs. So it's a mess.
Yeah, I have to say the AI thing is the worst part
Yeah.
of this whole thing where like you're just getting sieved out by this AI technology that doesn't even account for all the different nuances. As long as if you don't have any keywords in your resume, you're already being chucked out. And it's just that's what also makes it really, really hard as well. Like I personally hate the AI infusion in a lot of in a lot of this, especially right now, this current state. I might be the minority that thinks that. Like, I don't know if other people appreciate it or not, but for me, there's a part of me that doesn't really like the fact that you have to impress artificial intelligence and show it that you're worth the job.
It does sort of feel that way, doesn't it? Like you have to impress artificial intelligence. I mean, AI obviously has its upsides and its perks, but I
Hmm.
think it's moving a lot faster than we can, you know, control it or control for some of these things that are, less friendly to humans.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, you know what? So if you're listening to this, and again, if this is something that's happening to you, please do participate in the survey. I'm gonna post the link in the description of this episode. I'm also gonna post it on LinkedIn. I'm gonna post it on Instagram, wherever I post all this other stuff. So please do participate. I think the information will be very useful down the line. So I really encourage anybody who's gone through these layoffs and stuff to just participate. But I think we've kind of come at the end of our episode here. Tara, it's been great. I hope we can do this again. Hopefully, when more responses come, I feel like there's so much more
I love
to
talking to you.
chat about. Yeah, I love talking to you as well. I feel like I wish we had like 2 hours.
Yeah, that would be great.
You know,
Yeah.
so hopefully we can find some other time. Maybe when you've published your findings, and maybe
Sure.
we can have another episode to kind of talk about um what has come out from your research. Maybe that could be something we can do down the line. I think that would be great if someone wants to know what happened, so maybe that's something we could potentially plan for later. But I really do appreciate you coming on here and first of all telling your story and letting us to get to know more about you and then the work you've been doing as well. I'm really appreciative of you taking the time to come on here and just chat to me. So
Thank
thank you.
you. I really appreciate it. I'm so grateful for the time, and for your interest. And yeah, I'm just delighted that we got to meet.
Yeah, me too. I'm very, very delighted. So yeah, thank you so much. Comment on the episode as well. Comment, like, share, subscribe. If you like what we're saying, there's more good episodes to come as well. So watch out for those. And with that, thank you very much, and we'll catch you on the next one, everybody. Bye.